Hey guys, my name is Melissa Granger and I teach on-ramps rhetoric to juniors and seniors at Byron Nelson High School in Northwest ISD. We're in the North Fort Worth kind of area. I'm going to walk you through my process for planning out Module 2 of Rhetoric 306. The first place I'm going to start is the pacing resources for the fall of 2025. I'm on calendar C, so I have those due dates in mind when planning the semester, which is how we like to do it on my campus in my PLC. We like to look at the whole picture. So we take our blank calendar and plug in those college due dates first. And then we work backwards from there, planning how much time we actually have for different modules, how much time we need to spend on certain modules, depending on what we know our students know and are comfortable with coming into the course as well. So this will be my 10th year teaching on-ramps rhetoric. This is, relatively easy for me at this point, simply because I've done it so many times, but I haven't met my students yet. So please keep in mind that while I have so much of this already planned out and thought out, that can always be adjusted depending on what my students actually show up with, what skills they actually have as a starting point. Sometimes I assume they already know certain things, like what the word bias means or some other key terms from Module 2, and sometimes that's just not the case. We're starting with more of a blank slate with some of these things. So please keep in mind that this is just my process for planning it, and the actual application in the classroom will need to be adjusted once I meet my students and I see what they need. So keep that in mind. For the pacing guides, I'm going to work with the week by week pacing guide. I like this one for planning out, about how much time I may need for certain modules, but the other pacing guides are really excellent resources as well. This one, the semester at a glance, I'll open it real quick. I actually take this and I download it and save it, and I link it in our rhetoric Google Calendar that my students access to see what we're doing each day, what their homework is, what we'll be doing 2 weeks from now when they have a dentist appointment or whatever the situation is. I like to link this on there so that they can see how everything connects, relates to each other, and where we're going with this semester. So I like that pacing guide. And this one here is also really useful. This one gives you, let me zoom out just a smidge so you can see. This one gives you the sequence and then the percentage for the college assessment, like how it's connected or related to those different modules. And then as you look, each page is over each module, the conceptual learning, high school course, college course, and the college assessment, how it's all connected. So this one was really useful for me to look at just to remind myself of where we're going with all of this. So check that out. Today, I'm going to work mainly with this week by week guide, which I've already downloaded, saved to my Google Drive, and I have it open here as a Google Slides presentation, but it is a PowerPoint. So we're looking at Module 2 for this video. Knowing my students, I know that they're coming in with some research skills. They've been required to complete research their freshman and sophomore year, their junior year, if they're coming to me as seniors. So I know that they have way back in the recesses of their brains, in the recess of their brain, they have these ideas and they have these skills. We just need to draw them forward and remind them of that. So a lot of our class discussion on this is going to be what they've rediscovered or remembered or recalled, or what they may have learned for the first time, because some of these skills are going to be new for them. So in looking at the pacing guide, I'm going to count out how many days UT assumes or thinks we might need to cover this module, and just see where that fits into our calendar. So they'll start with some homework, some reading here. So I'm not really going to count that as a full class day, because that's something that they'll do at home. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. There's some reflection here on this day right here, but we'll use that day in class to work on a research summary. So I'm going to say 5 days. And really what I did the first time I planned this out was I took this pacing guide and I just copied this information and pasted it into my calendar. So let me bring my calendar over so you can see what that might look like this year, just based on what we have going on so far. So we have, we're in, sorry, we'll say this is week 0, even though we really do get into and dig into module 1 starting here on this Friday-ish. So week 1 and then week 2, we'll start with module 2 in class on that Friday, the 29th. And in looking at the pacing guide, that first day looking at module 2 has them reading for homework, and the next day doing some discussion boards, some optional quizzes, and then completing some more of those modules for homework. And that's pretty much what I have my students doing as well. So I essentially copied and pasted this into our calendar. And then knowing that I see my students 5 days a week for 45 to 47 minutes. Our bell schedule's been tweaked again this year, so I'm not really sure exactly how much time I have with them, but about 45 minutes, knowing what my students can complete in class and what they can do for homework. This being a Friday, it's safe for me to assign maybe a little bit more in class and then allow them through the weekend to complete that. So we'll discuss, review anything that we need to from the end of module 1, and then move into module 2 in class. Anytime we start a new module, I like to take time in class to review that module overview with them, especially if there's a video embedded for us to watch. So we'll watch this whole class. That will take, a few minutes of class time. There's a transcript if students need that. And then we talk about what the learning outcomes are, the purpose for this module, why it's essential, important, why it's here in the curriculum, some key terms. I feel like most of my students will be familiar with these terms: info argument and curated information, bias. Those might be unfamiliar words, but once we talk about them, I think they'll make the connection of, oh, they do know what they are. They just may not have heard those words specifically before. And then we'll go over just this table of contents for the module, what they'll be learning about, what their high school assignments are, and then what the college extended assignments will be. And while we do assign, I will probably assign a lot of these assignments. Some of them, especially once I meet my students, I may decide we don't need to do this one. Or I may decide, let's change this from a discussion board to maybe a class activity. Or I may have them do that with a partner, or just sort of change it up. Again, I don't know my students yet, so I don't have an idea of what they may need, but I can make some assumptions based on previous classes, some safe assumptions that can easily be tweaked. So I took the pacing guide and I took this information and copied and pasted it basically into my calendar. So my students, again, will start in class reviewing module 2, what those expectations are, terms they need to know, that kind of thing. And then we'll get into it. They'll start reading and taking notes on the different, the first few pages of the modules, finding sources, forming a research question, and keyword generation. I know that those are lessons that they have hit pretty hard in the previous classes that they've taken. So this really should be a point of review for many of the students. Over the weekend, they'll read about different search engines, databases, and encyclopedias. Again, our students have been expected to complete research in previous grade levels, and so they know how to access the databases through our high school library, through our high school resources. What we will do on that Tuesday morning is we'll come back whole class and talk about what did they learn, what was reaffirmed about their learning and understanding about how search engines work and how they promote certain sources, and maybe what they realized about some things, about some of the search engines and other resources. We'll also take some time here at the beginning to go through and specifically look at this module 2.7 together, comparing curated information, because our kids are familiar with using databases and resources like Gale opposing viewpoints. It will be essential for them to understand that they need to be looking at the uncurated information and understanding that difference. So we'll spend probably a lot of time on that. And then anything after that, you'll see, like for homework, it just says to complete the discussion boards not completed in class. And that's really because I'm not sure how hard we're going to need to, or how long we'll need to work through this curated versus uncurated information. But I know that that's going to be a big point for my kids. So we'll spend a lot of time on that. And then everything else will just be homework. The next day, we'll do the same, start with a debrief about evaluating information, determining if it's a viewpoint, that kind of thing. And then they'll spend some time in class independently or maybe with partners or small groups. We'll see, again, depending on my students, evaluating the info argument, evaluating the credibility of sources. We'll use the CRAP test on some of the sources that they may have already found, and then evaluating bias, which will be really big because they have to be unbiased in their presentation of information. And so making sure that they can pick up on it and recognize it will be very helpful for them. And then for homework, that pretty much ends where we'll spend class time on module 2 specifically. I will say that depending on the students and their learning, we may need to push things a little bit, but the plan right now is to really only spend about 3 days in class on module 2, 1, 2, 3, a little bit on the 4th of September. So that takes us into working on our first research summaries. We sort of do things out of order with the research summaries. We wait until they have those skills to find quality sources before we really have them sort of dig into that. And then that leads us to writing the formal research summaries, which leads us to the RSQ, which leads us to the mapping and controversy, and so on. But using these pacing guides as a way to just fill in my campus calendar, our PLC calendar, and then mapping and planning out from there, really what I think my students can do in a 45-minute class period. This is my process for that. I hope it was helpful.